The religion of Islam spread throughout Europe much more quickly than Christianity ever did. It arose in the 7th century after the Prophet Muhammad began to receive God's revelations in the year 610. And within a very short time, less than a century, the armies of Muhammad's successors had taken over what had been the Roman and Byzantine Empire. And they overtook a vast territory. We're talking mainly about all of the Middle East, including the eastern side of the Mediterranean, North Africa, into Spain, and even in the south of France. As I said, it happened very quickly. By 640, the Muslims rule Syria, Palestine, and Iraq. By 642, the Byzantine army had abandoned Alexandria, and this cleared the way for Muslims to conquer Lower Egypt. All of North Africa was under Muslim rule by 710, and they had victory in southern Spain by 711. They finally were stopped in the north of France, halted by an army of Franks. It wasn't just the military that was able to do this, but the faith appealed to millions and millions of converts. The region also is the heart of the Silk Road communication and served as a vital link between the East and the West. So they really dominated an area in the Middle East that was able to serve as a trade route, and the armies of Muhammad were also followed by trade routes that were places where ideas could travel as well as culture. In this slide, I'm giving you just a basic history of some of the main key events in the early spread of Islam. And also just a little bit about what you might need to understand about the faith of Islam before we start talking about the art. And as with my discussion of Christianity and with Judaism, this is meant to be very quick and very basic, providing you really with just the foundations of what you might need to know in order to understand the art that we're going to discuss. But as I mentioned, the faith of Islam arose in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century when the Prophet Muhammad received God's revelations. And that was in the year 610. He was born, Muhammad himself was born in Mecca and was part of a merchant family. He is considered the final prophet in a line of prophets that includes Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. And it's important to understand that I think Jesus is recognized as a prophet, but not a god in the Islamic religion. So Muhammad receives God's revelations through the Archangel Gabriel in 610. He and his followers leave Mecca. They're thrown out of Mecca and settle in Medina. The beginning of Islam dates from the beginning of this flight from Mecca to Medina. In 630, Muhammad returns to Mecca with 10,000 soldiers that had been converted, and they come to destroy the idols. They were very critical of polytheistic Arab religions, and the only thing they preserve is the Kaaba, which is Arab for the cube. This is a site and a monument that are preserved in Mecca as a direction of worship. The Kaaba is associated with the ear of Abraham and Ishmael, and is considered sacred. In 632, Muhammad dies, and within a few decades after that, his revelations, as stated in the Quran, are spread throughout the Muslim territory. The Quran is the sacred faith of the the sacred text of the Islamic faith. It's divided into 114 surahs or chapters. And the faith of Islam can be described in the 5 pillars of the religion, which are faith and the devotion to one true God, prayer, daily prayer, alms, which is the giving of charity, fasting during Ramadan, and Hajj, which is a pilgrimage. Anyone who is able is expected to travel to Mecca during their lifetime. The Islamic faith is also, within the spread of this territory, divided into 2 basic caliphates, or governing sections. The Umayyads in Syria and Spain, and the Abbasids in Iraq. And we'll talk more about that as we discuss the monuments. In the early years of Islamic history, the center of religious, political, and cultural power was in the Fertile Crescent of ancient Mesopotamia. The caliphs of Damascus, which is the capital of modern Syria, and Baghdad, the capital of Iraq, appointed governors to rule smaller regions. These governors eventually gained relative independence by setting up dynasties in territories and provinces. The best known and most powerful were the Umayyads in Syria and Spain, and the Abbasids in Iraq. Muslims capture Jerusalem in 638, and the first great Islamic building, the Dome of the Rock, which we're looking at here, was built between 687 and 692 by the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik. It is not a mosque, but really a tribute to the triumphs of Islam, and it marks the power of a new religion to the city that was sacred to both Jews and Christians. The dome rises on a huge platform known as the Noble Enclosure. This is where the Hebrews built the Temple of Solomon, which the Roman Emperor Titus destroyed. And you might remember the Arch of Titus in Rome, which has a relief carving of the sacking of Jerusalem by Titus, in which he is carrying off the spoils from the Temple of Solomon. And we see this menorah figure, this menorah shape here, and all of this gold booty is being brought back to Rome, where it will eventually be melted down into currency that will be used to build the Colosseum. At the center of the Dome of the Rock sits a large rock, which is believed to be the location where Abraham was prepared to sacrifice his son Ishmael. Ishmael is Isaac in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Today, Muslims believe that the rock commemorates the night journey of Muhammad. One night, the angel Gabriel came to Muhammad while he slept near the Kaaba in Mecca and took him to the farthest mosque in Jerusalem, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and from the rock, Muhammad journeyed to heaven, where he met the other prophets, such as Moses and Jesus, and witnessed paradise and hell, and finally saw God enthroned and circumambulated by angels. The rock, which is sitting right here in this cross-sectional view that I'm showing you, it's enclosed by 2 ambulatories that, in this case, encircle the rock. An ambulatory is essentially a arcade that you can walk around. So ambulatory literally means to walk around, and there's two of them. There's a central colonnade, which is a row of columns that's comprised of 4 piers and 12 columns supporting a rounded drum that transitions into this dome, which is actually, as you can see, is in 2 layers of more than 20 meters in diameter. The colonnades, and this is probably a better view for you to understand a colonnade, which is a series of columns and arches. The colonnades are clad in marble in their lower registers and above in rich mosaic decoration. Light pours in from a series of windows below the dome that allows natural light to come in and bounce off of mosaic tiles that are glistening, or gold and glistening, sparkling kind of tesserae. And you probably associate mosaic decoration with the many Byzantine churches, including San Vitale in Ravenna and Hagia Sophia that we've talked about. So the use of mosaic really reflects an artistic tradition that ties this region to the world of late antiquity and the Byzantine style. But the mosaics at the Dome of the Rock contain no human figures or animals. Islam does not prohibit the use of figurative art per se in religious buildings, but it is extremely discouraged. And although the Quran isn't clear on this, as the Bible is, the Ten Commandments is, we see that throughout the art of Islam, there are no figural representations of any religious imagery. So instead, we see vegetative scrolls, and you see these kind of spirals of vines, and also vessels and winged crowns, which were worn by Sasanian kings. And here's an image of one of these vessels. And you can see that the mosaic work is very similar to, say, San Vitale, in which we see this combination of little square tesserae put at little angles that allow for the gold to sparkle, and then circular pieces that are meant to evoke semi-precious stones. So if you look up at the inside of the Dome of the Rock, this repetition of a decorative program that has no figuration allows for the dome to kind of feel like it is spinning above you, especially as it floats on top of this ring of windows. Another important part of the program is an inscription in Arabic script that runs around the interior of the dome. This is 240 meters long and includes some of the earliest surviving examples of verses from the Quran. When we look at the art of the Islamic faith, we'll see that the Arabic script, which represents the true word of God, becomes, in a way, the presence of God in these spaces, since figural representations were forbidden. On the other side of the Muslim world, Abd al-Rahman fled to Spain in 750 to escape the Abbasid massacre of his clan in Syria. In Spain, the Arabs had overthrown the Christian Visigoths in 711. The Arab governors accepted him as their overlord, and he founded the Spanish Umayyad dynasty, which lasted 3 centuries. The capital of this dynasty was Cordoba, right here, which became a cultural center in the West.